All right, Rylan, let's go ahead and take a look at your essay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to check your MLA format first. And let me say, sorry, I just saw something odd. Um, I thought I saw something, but anyways, doesn't matter. Right here, this is good. This is correct format. This is good. Times New Roman size 12. Your title is good, except you do not have the proper capitalization. You need anxiety, adolescence, and rise over time. That all needs to be capitalized. As I'm going through, I'm not seeing any in-text citations yet. I see a potential concern we may have with MLA, but we'll find out later on. Also, thank you for doing this, because let me tell you, I've gone through a few essays by now, and people say according to this journal, and the way you have it set it up, it does need to be an italic, so kudos to you on that one. Your works cited looks mostly okay. Okay, this one I will let slide because it's the URL. This is all alphabetical order. Thank you for getting this right. A few people are putting that it's Bearden, and that's not who technically writes it. The only problem with this here is you have it indented when it doesn't need to be. But otherwise, your works cited looks pretty good. It's in alphabetical order. This I can forego because I know the links always screw it up and there's not much you can do in Google Docs. But other than that, this looks okay. I believe the Time magazine is supposed to go beforehand, so some small errors here and there, but for the most part, it seems like you have MLA format down, so I'm not mad about that. With that in mind, let's take a look at your introduction. So as I look through your paper, you do have a couple, it's your introduction and conclusion that seem a little bit short. And I think I've seen this with your writing before, Rylan, and I think, honestly, that's probably going to be your biggest thing to overcome as a writer down the road, is you want to build up that introduction and conclusion. And usually for people, you know, the introduction and conclusion is the hardest part to do. But if we look at this, this is pretty short, which usually short introductions can be okay. However, you need to build up a little bit more about depression and anxiety. And I think you are absolutely right. And there's nothing wrong with your introduction. You just need to build more info. And I think your thesis is okay. I think you need to add more towards the end. These changes often make teens more vulnerable to anxiety and depression, but this is more what your thesis is, and I'm seeing this a lot. And I think you kind of just need to flip-flop it, is teens can oftentimes be vulnerable to anxiety and depression during puberty, blah, blah, blah. And this changes. And then you say, over time, there has been an increase of depression and anxiety in adolescence. So I think you kind of need to flip-flop these more and add a little bit more context to what's going on, and you will be okay. So, because as we go on, this is an okay jump, because you have the intro. This may cause them to become more depressed or for teens to suffer from high levels of anxiety. What I would say is, I think you're talking about puberty right here, correct? Let me know if I'm wrong. Or, yeah. Because the way you have the transition here is vulnerable to anxiety and depression, and then you transition into this may cause them to become more depressed. Is it because they're vulnerable, or is it because they're going through puberty? I'm not sure. You need some more specifics here, because the way the introduction is set up just is something as simple as with the vulnerability of anxiety and depression, whatever it is can cause them to have higher levels of this, etc. So anyways, I had to take a small break to make sure I'm saying the right thing. So as we go through here, I think this is absolutely good. The content and what you have. But I think some of this needs more explanations and some retweaking. So what I'm going to do, Rylan, is I'm going to take this to show you what I would change. We're going to do that. Oh, that didn't want to do that for me. We're going to redo that. Boom, boom. Here's what you got. So I'm going to retweak a little bit of what you have said, so you can see what I'm doing with your writing. That, honestly, the thing of what I'm noticing with your writing, Rylan, is it's pretty good. And you're not wrong in any way. You just need to retweak a few things. So let's restructure your topic sentence first. I need to go back and look at what it is. Increase during puberty. So let me restructure this into what I'm interpreting this as is puberty can cause teens to, well, let me rephrase it. Puberty can affect teens by making them more susceptible to anxiety and depression. And then that's good there. So I'm gonna keep this up here so you can look at the difference. So you can see that I'm taking your ideas, retweaking your writing just a little bit, so you can see it's still your writing and ideas. And then you have a main question. I think what you need to do to retweak this next sentence, because it's a little bit awkward with from the teen to the parent back to the teen. Say, parents often ask of their teens what is going on in their head. And I think that's okay to leave here. Okay. And instead of, things in big or words that you want to get rid of for your academic kind of writing. So you could just say scientists have discovered that a teen's action, and because I'm doing that, I'm getting rid of that, is that teens' actions will dictate potential problems that, I'm going to fix that because that's going to annoy me, have discovered, dictate problems that, I'm just going to copy this, they're unaware of, also, blah, blah, blah. All right, and right here, you don't need also that because, I know what you're saying, but you can just say also a teen's social habits could aggravate a situation that is already tough for a teen. So this is really good. I think it's really, really, really good evidence. What I think you need to say in particular is, I know this is coming from somewhere in particular. So my guess is, I'm not sure where it's coming from. I'm not sure if it's from here. I don't remember if it's in Jacqueline's. I can't remember off the top of my head, but what you need to say instead is scientists have discovered, or say, according to person or author, and don't have the quotation marks in there, in their article title, and you leave the article title there. That is fine, because this is saying where you get the source from. And then this is where it needs to be retweaked a little bit more. Adolescence is a period in the life that is very similar to infancy. Wait, nope, I'm going to stop. We need this by itself. I think you could then spend a few sentences to explain what's going on here. As evident through these studies, teens are already exposed to consequences of anxiety and depression simply because of their changing brain. I don't know, something. Because I just realized as I was typing this up, right here is an idea of by itself. Because you say there's dramatic changes going on in the brain during both periods, and I think you do need to spend a little bit of time to explain what's going on in infancy and why that matters, because explain that a little bit more and then be like, okay, also in adolescence, their motivation, self-control, this is all going through a major change. So they're not solidified in their thoughts and their actions are based on brain functionality. So a little bit, you can pause this if you want. I changed some of your wording and looked at how you can do the MLA, because right now, technically this is plagiarism because you're getting this from a source and you need to be clear where this is coming from. Okay. But as you move on in the self-control part of the brain, a teen's actions, and okay. So this is a little bit awkward. You need to change the wording here. In the self-control part of the brain, maybe a comma, a teen's actions, get rid of that comma, and self-control will be mostly based on what the outcome of them doing something will be. So this is a little bit awkward. I think what you're trying to say is, especially from here, if they get a reward, they'd be more likely to do it. So I think maybe your topic sentence just needs to be, the better the reward, the more likely a teen is to do something. and that could set it up a little bit. And that might even fit in one of your previous paragraphs as well. If we split this into two different ideas, is their actions are based on this. So maybe combine these two paragraphs and separate them into two separate, where if we look at the Microsoft Word document, talk about puberty and the brain changing, and then have the second paragraph be all about rewards and how they respond to them. And I think that'll be good. This is okay. I don't think you quite need the bipolar instance in here. And I personally struggle with saying bipolar phase isn't good because it's something that people go through and we don't really want the stigma that it's all bad. But overall, I think you have some decent topic sentences. I think you just need to reconsider the framework of your essay so far. And then I think your next paragraph is really good because you talk about Dr. Bearden. You need some context for who Dr. Bearden is, because the first time you introduce a source or a person, you always want to add context to who they are. Like I said in class, even if someone referenced me, because I do have, it's hard to find, but I have some publishings out there about certain topics. So if someone said Jason Hall's study on Los Angeles Aqueduct, because that's my history research, says blah, blah, blah. That shows nothing about who I am until you say, an educator who specialized in water laws, whatever. So you need some specification here. But otherwise, the way you introduce everything is good. And I think this is really good, except for you need more context to how not getting enough sleep can result in more anxiety. And I know this is coming from a source, so all you really need, Rylan, at this point is just more context to what's going on. And then as we move on, I think social media is a very good topic to have, but I don't like your topic sentence. And that's because in your writing, when you have a question, you should never pose a question on the reader. Just tell us straight out with what this is. And I think this is a good segue into what you're talking about, but maybe retweak this to say, social media can have both positive and negative effects on a teen's mental health, which you would need an apostrophe there. And then you have here's some harsh, but here's a little bit of good. But the thing is, YouTube can have a positive effect. So if you're going to include anything about a positive effect, you need more than just this website is good with it. Because you have a lot about how this can be negative and how people will not get good things out of it. But if you're going to include that positive, you need to take it a little bit more. During the teenage years, you can get rid of that. Depression becomes an issue in teens. Yep, you just said this is in teenage years, so you don't need this. So it becomes a major issue, and it's something that parents should look out for. So now we're getting into let's look for depression and whatever it is. Commonly known to affect girl. It should be girls, unless we're talking Bird Box, and it affects girl more than boy. And then you go into it makes sense that girls suffer more depression because it hits earlier. Okay. Well, I don't know if I would say harder. It's definitely earlier. You'd have to explain this. And again, with this, I think you need to add some more context to what's going on. And I don't really know why you transition into children. I think that could be its own paragraph about how it's even starting earlier. Not only is it rising, it's starting earlier. So as we move on, you finally get into the rising with the Pediatrics Journal. It's risen 37%. I would specify if this is depression across the board or teens. You do that now. But I would put that right in there just so it's a little bit easier, more succinct for us to see. So I only have about a minute left, so I'm going to wrap up. This paragraph is pretty good because it looks into how to use some resources well. 3 million teens reported a major depressive episode, etc. And then you have the ages in your conclusion about who is more depressed. You've got to face an issue here. Puberty is a big factor. Okay, fair. And you explain it a little bit more. So here's my big thing to you. I think your paragraphs need to add more context to what is going on. I don't think you have a whole lot of context or research or evidence to back everything up. And part of that is just because you're not using any in-text citations. You're not providing information of where this is coming from. And like I looked at with the Microsoft Word, you need to reorganize a few things. And the last thing I'll say is you have a lot about how anxiety and depression is caused, but I don't think you have a lot about how it's rising. So prove to me and show me more research that it is rising.